Stories Philippines Podcast.
A chill has settled over this story, touching on scenes and themes that venture into the deepest shadows of human experience and the monstrous things we become. Listener discretion is more than suggested. The smell of boiling coconut milk and lemongrass was thick in the air. It was a smell that meant comfort. The simple promise of a hearty Visayan dinner, the kind that sticks to your ribs and makes the world outside the bamboo walls seem less harsh. Annalyn, a young woman living in a modest home outside Rojas City in the province of Capiz, leaned over the stove, stirring the contents of a chipped enamel pot. Her husband, Gregorio, would be home soon from the pier. Their two boys, 7-year-old Marcus and 5-year-old Jared, were playing with wooden tops on the worn plank floor. Everything was ordinary. Everything was whole. But the steam rising from that pot carried more than the scent of spices. It carried the faint metallic tang of something else, something hidden beneath the aromatic facade. Annalyn breathed in, a small involuntary shudder running through her. She pushed the thought away, focusing on the rhythmic stir of the wooden spoon. In the humid darkness outside, the shadows were already beginning to stretch long and distorted, taking on the unsettling shapes of things that should not exist. The truth is, many of the oldest stories, the ones that truly dig their claws into the cultural psyche, often begin not with a demon's shriek or a ghost's whisper, but with the quiet, devastating sound of a choice being made. The slow, creeping sense of desperation that turns a person into a caricature of their former self. The legend of Maria Labo is one such story. It's a horror, born not just of folklore and fear, but of hunger and the invisible, crushing weight of poverty that can devour a soul faster than any supernatural beast. I am Paul, and you are listening to Stories Philippines Podcast. The island of Panay is a place of vivid green mountains and a history written in blood and sugarcane. The legend of the aswang, the quintessential Filipino shape-shifting monster, is perhaps nowhere stronger than in the heart of the Visayas, particularly in Capiz. It's a place where the shadows seem to move with an intention all their own. The word aswang is a broad term, encompassing a whole host of creatures. The flying manananggal, that separates its torso from its legs, the vampiric tik-tik that feeds on the unborn, and the earthbound, cannibalistic ghoul. The tales of Maria Labo, however, don't belong to the ancient myths. They are a product of a later anxiety, a story that bloomed in the 1970s and 1980s, spreading like a fever through the newly interconnected provinces. It is a modern urban legend, reflecting the turbulence of the time. In the decades following the Second World War, the Philippines experienced waves of intense economic shifts. Many families, particularly in the provinces, found themselves trapped in a cycle of crushing debt and dwindling opportunities. The promise of a better life often lay overseas. In the 1980s and 90s, the exodus of overseas Filipino workers, or OFWs, became a defining feature of the national experience. Men and women left their children and spouses, venturing into the unknown of the Middle East, Europe, or North America to send back remittances that kept their families afloat. Maria Labo, the figure at the center of the legend, is often portrayed as one of these migrant workers. Her story, in its most common retelling, begins with her desperately seeking work abroad to support Gregorio and their two sons. The version of her story that grips the collective imagination is dark, reflecting the terrible risks and hidden dangers of working in a foreign land. One version of the legend claims she was a caretaker in Canada or the Middle East. While there, she was reportedly bitten or scratched by an old, strange woman she was nursing. Another version, much more culturally resonant, involves a pact or a curse. In this telling, Maria unknowingly accepts a job from a sorceress or a witch, a mangkukulam, and in exchange for high pay, she is secretly cursed with the spirit of a cannibalistic aswang. This curse, however, is not immediately evident. It is a slow poison, an appetite that grows inside her, waiting for the right moment to strike. This concept of an overseas affliction has international parallels. Throughout history, immigrants and those who return from foreign lands have often been viewed with a mixture of suspicion and awe. In medieval Europe, the return of crusaders sometimes brought tales of foreign diseases or dark magic. In the New World, returning sailors brought back strange customs and sometimes terrifying plagues. Maria Labo's story taps into this universal anxiety. The idea that leaving home, venturing into the labas, laot dam, can fundamentally change and corrupt a person. Imagine the young woman Maria, perhaps in a distant land, feeling the pressure of her responsibility, the letters from home begging for more money, the exhaustion of her demanding job, the isolation. That slow burning stress is the tinder for the supernatural transformation. The legend suggests the curse manifested subtly at first, a strange craving for raw meat, an unnatural strength, and a growing coldness toward her family back home. When Maria finally returned to the Philippines, she brought not just the expected boxes of pasalubong or gifts, but something monstrous hidden inside her. She was thinner, the story goes, with eyes that seemed too wide and too vacant. Back in Roxas City, Gregorio, the husband, was ecstatic. He had his wife back, the boys had their mother. For a brief time, the household settled into a comfortable rhythm. But the tension soon began to coil tighter than a rope under strain. Maria was different. She often stayed up late, staring into the darkness. She'd snap at the children for minor things. And then came the subtle culinary shift. Maria began using an unusually large amount of strong spices in her cooking: ginger, garlic, chilies, and bay leaf. She insisted on preparing the family's meals herself, keeping Gregorio away from the kitchen. One afternoon, Gregorio and the boys had been out fishing. They came home late, tired and ravenous. Maria met them with a hearty, savory stew. "It's a special dish," she told them, her voice unnaturally flat. The boys devoured it, commenting on the meat's incredibly tender texture. Gregorio, though suspicious of the overly rich flavors, ate a bowl too, telling himself it was the taste of home he'd missed. It was later that evening that the horror began to truly settle in. Gregorio needed a cup of water, and as he walked past the kitchen, he saw something in the shadows that made his stomach lurch. On the worn wooden counter, covered with a bloody, stained bayong, a woven bag, were the small, disfigured heads of his two sons, Marcus and Jared. Their eyes were wide open, locked in a silent, eternal scream. The terror of the moment is so profound it barely needs a supernatural explanation. The loss, the betrayal, the unspeakable act of a mother turning her children into the main course. The story's power lies not just in the cannibalism, but in the shattering of the most sacred bond, that of a mother and her child. This element of filicide, the murder of one's own children, is a recurring dark motif across global folklore, from the Greek tragedy of Medea to various European witch stories. Minsan, it represents the ultimate breakdown of natural order and morality. In a blind, terrible rage, Gregorio grabbed the first thing he could find, an old machete, and lunged at Maria. In the legend, she is not killed. Being an aswang, she possesses an unholy resilience. Gregorio manages only to wound her deeply, slashing her face. She flees into the night, the sound of her unearthly wail echoing through the coconut groves. That slash, the labo or cut, is what gives her the name Maria Labo, the wounded, marked woman who has committed the ultimate, unspeakable crime. For a moment, let's step away from the blood and the monster. What does this legend say about the community that created it? The legend of Maria Labo is often used as a cautionary tale for OFW parents. It's a dark mirror reflecting the profound guilt and fear felt by those who leave their children. The mother who sacrifices her presence for money fears that in her absence, something essential will be lost, or that the material wealth she sends will be contaminated by the otherness of the foreign land. Maria Labo is the embodiment of the fear that leaving home will turn you into a monster who can no longer recognize or care for her own flesh and blood. This legend is often cited in discussions of the broken family phenomenon linked to OFW employment. In a society that places immense value on the nuclear family, the economic necessity of separation creates a psychological void. The Aswang curse, in this sense, is a metaphor for the social and emotional decay that sets in when economic forces shatter domestic tranquility. The Aswang, traditionally a figure of internal threat, often a seemingly normal person living among the townsfolk, becomes the perfect vehicle for this cultural trauma. The story doesn't end with Maria's flight. Urban legends thrive on the unsettling sense of just maybe. The tale continues with sightings. Maria Labo is said to wander the islands, always drawn to places where children are vulnerable, where families are struggling. She is described as looking like a normal aging woman, save for the large, perpetually weeping scar across her cheek, the one Gregorio gave her. The fear is heightened by the possibility that she might be your neighbor, your market vendor, or the kind stranger who offers your child a piece of candy. Her appearances are often tied to places where social anxiety is already high. In the slums of Tondo or the dense anonymous communities of Caloocan City, the story of Maria Labo finds new resonance. Here, poverty is a constant, gnawing presence. The legend subtly shifts, reflecting the local anxieties. Sometimes she is a phantom hitchhiker. Sometimes she is a shadowy figure seen near Puroks, with many unsupervised children. If you enjoy hearing the darker side of these cultural stories that scrape against the deepest fears in the human heart, please consider supporting the work we do. You can access exclusive content and extended episodes on Patreon. Your support helps us dive deeper into the shadows of Philippine history and folklore. The legend has a kind of dark theological insight. In the Philippines, a deeply Catholic nation, the concept of a creature that defiles the sacrament of family and commits such a profound act of sacrilege is terrifying. The Aswang is often depicted as having a deep aversion to religious objects, like holy water and the cross. Maria Labo, as an Aswang, represents the complete inversion of the Virgin Mary, the ideal Filipino mother. She's anti-Maria, the destroyer instead of the protector, the source of death rather than life. This theological conflict amplifies the horror, making her not just a local monster, but a cosmic offense. The enduring power of the story also has a strange, global echo in the study of collective trauma. When societies face overwhelming hardship, famine, war, or in this case, the crushing weight of global economic disparity, the psychological response often manifests as a shared narrative of a monstrous evil. This is the folkloric projection of collective stress. Instead of acknowledging the complex, messy truth of poverty and parental desperation, the real-world monsters that drive people to unthinkable acts, it's often easier to externalize the problem, to call it an Aswang curse. Consider the science behind fear. The brain reacts most intensely to threats that are both familiar and betraying. A mother, the ultimate symbol of safety, turning into a cannibal is the perfect storm of psychological terror. It disrupts the fundamental security mechanism of the human mind. The sensory details in the legend, the smell of the heavily spiced stew, the metallic tang of blood, the sight of the children's severed heads, are so viscerally rich that they bypass rational thought and lodge themselves directly into the oldest, most reactive part of the brain. The vivid details ensure the story is sticky. It's impossible to forget. In the modern era, the tale of Maria Labo has continued its evolution. It has been the subject of films, television shows, and countless internet posts. The digital age has ensured that Maria Labo, the 21st century Aswang, is now everywhere at once. The anxiety she represents, the fear of a loved one returning, fundamentally changed. The fear of unseen foreign curses, the fear of being consumed by economic need, is now broadcast globally. This persistent narrative is a powerful warning that sometimes the biggest threat is not the mythical beast lurking in the trees, but the person who looks just like your wife, just like your mother sitting across the dinner table. It's a story about the fragility of the self when placed under impossible pressure. It is a terrifying realization that the darkness doesn't always come from the outside. Sometimes it's smuggled back home in a balikbayan box, having been purchased with a contract of desperation. This is the kind of darkness that permeates the human story, the kind that makes you pause when your loved one seems a little too quiet, their eyes a little too distant, a story that makes you look twice at the seemingly tender meat in your stew. The tale of Maria Labo is a tragedy first and a horror story second, a devastating portrait of how the world's indifference can transform a human being into something utterly monstrous, a reminder that sometimes the cost of economic survival is the annihilation of the soul. If you have a similar story, perhaps one about a strange occurrence in your own family's past, or a local legend that gives you chills, you can submit your stories to our email, storiesphpodcast@gmail.com. We are always looking for the next dark corner to explore. Also, find show notes and support options in the description of this episode. The story continues. Maria Labo, forever walking, her scar a testament to a moment of irreversible horror. She is the ghost of what poverty does, the eternal wanderer, a mother whose love was consumed by a far older, darker hunger. The shadows tonight are deep. Are you certain who is sharing the dark with you? Is the monster truly the one who fled into the night? Or is it the system that created her? The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. The greatest trick hunger pulls is convincing a mother that she has no choice. You can listen to our previous episodes to hear more tales of Philippine horror and history, or tune in next time for another journey into the stories that haunt these islands. Do not forget to like, subscribe, follow, and share this podcast. Support the podcast financially in ways you can find in the show notes.